welcome to the Social Engineering Podcast. We're on episode 3 this month. We are back with our panel this month, too. Here we got Mutz, or a.k.a. Maddie. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Chris.
And Jim, a.k.a. Elwood. What's going on, Jim?
Just this call. I'm excited to be here.
And myself, Logan or Chris. So a lot's going on over the last month. I think we've been adding some things to the site. We had a lot of feedback from our last podcast. That last interview with Tom Mischke really went very well. A lot of people were calling in, writing in email, coming onto the IRC channel, and talking about what they learned from that podcast. So it was a really good one. We really liked that.
What were the main reviews from that one?
A lot of people never, when they first heard that we were doing a radio host, we announced it in the newsletter. I think I had probably 20 or 30 people in the channel physically say when they saw that, they were thinking, what the heck is wrong with these guys? What does that got to do with social engineering? And then they downloaded the podcast, listened to it, and they were like, holy mackerel. Who knew we can learn so much about pretexting from a radio host?
Yeah, that's the same process that we underwent, basically.
Yeah, everyone but Jim, because it was his idea. So, Jim, you just owned the whole world through that podcast. That was good.
It's a modern-day Rickroll, huh?
Yeah. But everybody was I haven't had one negative feedback on that. We had a lot of positive feedback and a lot of Twitter, people signing up for us on Twitter, Human Hacker, and then retweeting about the podcast, talking a lot about what was going on in the podcast. Dave's not with us this time, but his contact that he put us up with from Security Justice, they were really pushing the podcast heavy. So a lot of nice positive feedback on it. It was really good. A lot of people calling in saying, just keep up the good work. And not just in the U.S., all over the world. I was surprised at how many people were coming in from all over Europe and even in Asia, different areas, writing in about the podcast. So it was really nice to see. I guess we're kind of out there more than we really thought we were, so that's nice. Maybe just to talk a little bit about our sponsor for this month. We are again working with Spy Associates, spyassociates.com. They sell the real spy hardware, not that cheap Toys R Us stuff, but their main clients are law enforcement, government, and last month they gave us that really neat GPS device. Well, this month they gave us a digital voice recorder that looks like a pen. It's amazing, actually. I just got done doing my write-up on it. It's a fully functional pen. It writes and works just like a pen, looks exactly like a pen, but it has a very high-powered microphone hidden in the ridge. You cannot see it unless you know exactly what you're looking for. And the range on the thing is amazing. I had it in my pocket and did a couple tests with it, and it can pick up voices from across the room. You can record about 4.5 hours on the highest quality setting. Really, really neat device. I think for social engineering it would come in really handy if you're going to go in and do any kind of physical on-site social engineering where you're going to be talking to somebody. Maybe you want to catch the things that are being said. If you're not going to be able to listen to every aspect or remember it, this will help you do that. Really, really a high-tech device. And it writes really nice, too. It's a nice pen besides that. So I got the write-up on that. It will be coming out in the newsletter. Actually, the newsletter's already out. You already saw that, and it's on the website under the framework. So we look forward to the next device. We don't know what that is yet, but we've got some pretty neat stuff coming out. So if you want to check that out, it's on spyassociates.com, and it's the Slim Pen Recorder. There's a link to it on our framework and in the newsletter, so you can check that out there. Let's see. What else do we got going on? What's new with you guys?
And the silence prevails.
And the silence prevails. There's just not that much new, huh? Or is there just so much you can't think of it?
The second one is probably the right one.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if we want to do this, Maddie, but you can tell me. Do you want to talk about the exploit database?
No.
No? Why not?
I've just done recovering from it, my friend.
Oh, but I tell you,
setting that up in record time was like
record time. I don't even. You jumped time. You skipped time setting that thing up. That was amazing.
What's capacitor?
That's an amazing utility for online now. I mean, I can't believe the way that's working and how many people have been hitting that site.
Yeah, we've been getting lots of positive feedback about it. It was just something that needed to happen after Mealworm stopped updating. To me, Mealworm was like a daily tool, and having it not update was just something that I couldn't live with.
Yeah, it's beautiful to have this here now, and to go there every day. What is it? Exploitdb.com, right?
Yeah, exploit-db.
Exploit-db.com.
But no pushing my stuff. Come on.
It's a nice site. Come on,
it is
open source for the community. So we thought, what the heck? We're doing all this open source stuff on the podcast. We might as well talk about it.
What is today's podcast?
It's a real shame that Relic's not here, because for the last 2-3 podcasts now, he's been promoting free chicks.
He has. Hey, that was my idea.
Yeah, it was your idea. And, and I'm always like, nah, we don't want to be promoting that. It's not really what we're about. But then, this month, Elwood is doing his normal social engineering on me, where he's got this great idea for a podcast, and I'm the one who shoots it down right away until he talks me into it. It makes me realize that he's actually a genius and I'm a moron. And it's about getting free chicks.
I like it.
So where's Dave when you need him?
I can't believe it. I can't believe he didn't come.
I know he's in between some things, so maybe he'll be able to log in a little bit later. But anyway, if not, we should just dedicate this one to Dave, I think.
All right.
You're in spirit.
So our guest, which will be logging in shortly, is Sam Yagen. I hope I'm saying his name right. If not, he'll correct me when he comes on. But he is one of the CEO and co-founders of OKCupid.com. And Sam, he's got a really interesting background. We'll let him get into a lot of the background more when he logs on, but he's a Harvard grad, a math genius, and he put those two things together with his love of internet business, and they created, many of us might remember this, there was a website called sparknotes.com, and it was like a place where people went and you did all these personality tests, IQ tests, funny surveys that told you who you're matched with, and just different things like that. And it got so popular, it got so big that Barnes & Nobles came in and bought this guy out. And they were still college students.
Wow.
They were just a couple kids in college, and they had this great idea, turned it into an internet business. Well, I was reading this one interview with Sam, and he made a really interesting point, which I think kind of hits home with some of the things that we do. So he said, they took an idea that people pay for, they made it better, and they made it free. And that brings the people in, and that's what they did with their new idea, the OKCupid. It's a really unique site where I think you were telling me about it, Elwood. It's right now it's free for right now, right?
Yeah, it looks like you can have a membership if you want, but otherwise membership on it's free. Looks to be a dating service, but it's one of those that utilizes math on the back end. So a lot of automated matching and that sort of thing. So
how does it do that?
Kind of interesting.
What do we know about it so far? Like, how does it use math in order to do that?
Well, based off what they say in their FAQ, they have a number of questions. They have their own questions that they provide, and users are actually encouraged to generate their own questions. And they'll have a question, maybe about 3 or 4 different answers, and you can answer the way you feel. Then you put down what a potential match would necessarily answer and how important that question is for you. And then they have an algorithm on the back end that will utilize that information to automatically show you various matches and what percentage of a match they are to you, what percentage of not a match to you, and kind of go off of that. So it's a wonderful data set that they have. And where they first came on my radar is they have a great blog at blog.okcupid.com where they data mine out of that data set. If you can imagine, you have such a large amount of users on the system. I think logging into the system right now, they have 13,921 users on right now. So that's even far beyond that as far as actual user base. And they have this wonderful data set where all these people are answering various questions, and they'll just farm it. They'll just data mine it, and they get some extremely interesting answers that they can bring up. For instance, one of the wonderful blog posts that they had up there that just really jumps out there is exactly what to say in a first message. And to bring this around to social engineering, there's always that question of how do you entice somebody to in an email to take an action. Well, this directly correlates. This is the same sort of thing. Instead of trying to trick someone into clicking on a link that might install some software or what have you, they're trying to get another user to respond to them so that they could potentially get a date. And they break down what sort of content is in messages that actually get back a response. And so I'm really interested in speaking to them about the answers that they were able to come up with out of there.
Now imagine this, Mutz. He paints this whole picture for me, and my first reaction is, well, computer dating doesn't really have much to do with social engineering.
That's exactly what I wanted to say. I wanted to say, so how exactly is this? Not that I have anything about getting free chicks.
Yeah, you and I are talking about this, and I'm thinking, to myself, well, he's telling me this. Yeah, okay, well, that's all great and fun, and you sound excited, Jim, but I don't know what you're smoking again because I don't hear anything about social engineering in there. And then as he's telling me and I'm reading these blog posts, what I'm seeing is framing. This guy is professional. This website is a professional framing website.
So what is framing then?
Well, framing is a process where you manipulate the perceptions or you manipulate data, whether it's either verbal or visual, written, so that what you want to come across to that person is what comes across. So you're manipulating this data, kind of, if you think about framing in a sense of physical framing, put a frame around a picture. You want what border you want around it, what you want people to see, what you want it to look like. Well, you do that with your words or what you write, and that gives the people the perception that you want them to have.
Borderline lying.
Well, okay, maybe that was that's like you gave the 2-cent explanation.
That sounds interesting. I mean, does that tie into NLP?
It does, actually. Framing is part of the psychological principles of social engineering, where you need to really think about people as a category. Like when you approach someone, not every type of information you have will work on every type of person.
Yeah.
Right. If you're talking to a very visual type person and you're using auditory responses, you're using words that are more of an auditory response, and you just shut that person off. So I think part of framing is also learning how to read people, and that's what really struck my interest when Jim was talking about this website was, boy, these people teach you how to respond, how to email. What are your best chances? What things really don't work when it's your first time response to somebody? And I thought, okay, now we're not really, promoting dating per se, but how can we use this information in the social engineering aspect? Because many of the times we're going to be dealing with the secretaries or the front desk people or people that we've never met before, complete strangers, and how can we frame our information to get the best chance at getting a response that we want?
So if we could get a general categorization of people and what they respond best to, that would be a very, very powerful tool.
It would be.
And that's what's wonderful about this, where when doing social engineering, everybody has things that work for them, and they're believers in them. But this is actual proof of these things work and these things do not work, and it's a level of detail that is extremely difficult to come by in any other method.
Yeah, and I think some of the surveys that I was looking over that you pasted to me, they had 300, 400, 500,000 responses to these surveys.
Right. And they draw an analogy between how many users will answer one of their questions versus how many respondents they get out of, say, a Gallup survey. And with the idea being the larger the data set, the more accurate result you're going to get. I'm not too big into stats, and he'll be able to explain that process a lot better than I, but from everything I've seen on here, they also control for outliers as well so that the results don't get skewed.
Yeah, I found this one that was really interesting. I mean, it kind of was funny when I was reading it. They had this chart that showed from a sender to a receiver, what was the percentage of reply? So, and by race. So they did this by race. So they had the race of people, and then how many percent was the reply to the sender. So if an Asian female sent a message to a black male, there was a 55% chance of a reply. That was the highest. The lowest was a black male sending a message to an Asian female. So the exact reverse. So the males would reply to the females, but not the other way around. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, they break down race, they break down religion, and a few other things like that are, you get some very interesting results, and it kind of peels back the layer of what people say they will do compared to what they actually do.
Yeah, exactly. That's one thing they had in this column. They had this chart, what the reply should be and what it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that to be really, really interesting. So I think what Mutz was saying, it would be really cool to get that piece of information. You know, is there a way to categorize people? And I can almost envision when we get in a social engineering, let's say, audit, and we're walking into a building, being able to size up somebody as soon as you see them. You know, maybe if you have some of these kind of data sets in your mind, or you were to observe somebody and you were to say, well, this is the way they dress, this is the way they look, this is, you know, we can size that up and say this kind of person might be more like this, and it will give us a heads up, leg up on that social engineering engagement. I think that would be really a powerful tool to be able to do. I think we should think about doing some kind of surveys on our site. Get some of this information going on our site. Not necessarily
for free chicks.
Yeah. I don't know if that will work. So let's see. Well, we're waiting for Sam to log on. You know, we should mention our newsletter. We got some excellent reviews on that too. I think the last month's articles are really good. We just released a week ago the newest edition of the newsletter. Some really interesting stories on that. I think the human buffer overflow article really went across well. I had a lot of people write in about that article. And
great explanation, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks. The taskbar one too got, again, I think everyone likes your writing style, Jim. They like that taskbar. I had a guy in the channel actually suggest that we take some information from that article, and when we're in, because we're thinking about hitting up Shmoo, do a little test of shoulder surfing and see what we can learn from people by taking shots, camera shots of their screens.
Interesting.
Do it in real life.
Yeah.
So maybe we shouldn't have announced that on the podcast, and everyone will be like,
we'll be the guys with the cameras. So,
yeah.
And we'll be on the shoulder surfing contest. So just if you see us.
Yeah, I guess that might.
I gotta admit, anyone starts trying to take pictures of my screen, I'm going to get nervous.
Yeah, well, we have to do it very covertly.
Yeah.
Are we going to be getting like cool spy stuff? Like
I requested from Spy Associates a nice covert camera for February. So I told him why, and he said that was a great plan, because then we can really play it up at Shmoo. And so he's going to send me this really, really awesome body.
Are we going to Shmoo?
Yeah, I think I'm pushing for it. I think we should. Shmoo was like the start of it all, man. Plus, it's a fun time.
Where's the night vision at?
I want to get one just to see you walking around ShmooCon with night vision goggles. I want to bring it just for that reason, But if you want to sign up for the podcast or the newsletter, you can go to our website. It's socialengineer.org, and then there's a newsletter link there. You can sign up for that, get it automatically. We do post it on the website in the archives about a week or two after it gets released publicly. So you can check that out if you don't want to sign up. But we got a lot of people signing up for that, too. A lot of people really enjoying reading the newsletter. We have too many people asking us to do weekly things, which I know we can't do just yet.
Yeah.
Sam has just joined us in here. Sam, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. We appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. We were just talking a little bit about the site OKCupid, and maybe you can give us a little background. You can tell us a little bit about your site, like how many users you have, how you work the site, and things like that. Give us a little background of yourself and the site there.
Sure. My partners and I started OKCupid a few years ago because we believed that the online dating sites that were out there, mostly Match and eHarmony and the like, basically were flawed in two important ways. First, they had the wrong product. Their product was not a social product. It was a product that was very lonely, a product that you would use by yourself. and didn't really stimulate the dynamics of dating, which are inherently social, that you see happening outside in real life. My partners and I, unlike a lot of other dating site founders, we're not psychologists, we're not relationship experts, we're all math majors. And so we come at this problem of online dating much more as, let's try to simulate what happens in the real world online rather than, we know what's best for you as psychologists, and we're going to tell you who you should go on dates with. So we saw the product as one that could be very vastly improved upon, and so I'll go into that in a second. And then the other thing that we saw was all of the major sites were charging subscription fees. And we looked at that business model and said it's flawed in a couple ways, but most importantly, whenever you have a marketplace online, and if you think about the big marketplace businesses, Craigslist, eBay, PayPal all come to mind, where you basically want to transact with a stranger or somebody you don't already know, you want the biggest marketplace you can find with appropriate search and filtering technology. It shouldn't be a fragmented market. You should have one really, really big dating site that allows people all the functionality that they need to customize it to their own needs. So we thought in order to reach that, you'd want a free site, a site that could be the big dominant player. So again, we saw the product was flawed. We saw the business model was flawed. And so you asked about how we run the site. Obviously, it's entirely free and ad supported. On the product side, there's really two things that we do, I think, that differentiate us. The first is that we really try to make the site fun and social. Again, we think of ourselves a little bit like an online bar in that it's a place that we want single people to feel comfortable bringing their friends to. Let's go hang out at OKCupid and meet people. So we have a lot of fun things on the site. We try to keep it very lighthearted. Among them would be the personality quizzes that you see on the site.
Yeah.
We have a blog that's very popular that, again, is just intended to spark conversation. So just as a bar might have trivia night or karaoke or obviously alcohol to kind of, get the conversation started, we really wanted to have that same feel at OKCupid. And then the other thing that we do better than anyone else is our matching algorithm, which we can get into later on if you want, but we think that we've actually gotten the best system for helping people find their most compatible matches on the site.
If you figure out a way to get beer to people on the website, let me know.
That would be a big business.
Yeah, I think you'd be a multi-billionaire. Now, something you said really sparked my interest. Okay, so you guys aren't psychologists. You're all math majors. You were all in Harvard together, right?
Yep.
Okay, so how did what aspect of math were you actually thinking about when you came up with a site? Because when I think of dating, I don't actually think of math at all, or even social interaction. And forget dating, social interaction with people. How did you come to work math into this?
Right. So basically, it's we'll get into the math in 1 second, but I guess more generally, it's the analytical approach that we take, which is very much about we don't know what's best for you. You know what's best for you. We want to be a provider of a platform or provider of a solution for you to come up with your own matching algorithm. So here's what we said. Imagine one of your best friends from college called you up and said, "Hey, I've got a great girl I want to set you up on a date with." Well, no matter how, and that's often how that kind of interaction is often how you'll meet someone new or you'll be introduced to someone new. We asked ourselves, what is the process that a person goes through in determining whether or not they're going to accept that introduction, go on a date with that person? No matter what, you're not just going to say, "Yeah, sure, I'll go on a date with whoever you want." No matter how much you trust your friend, you're going to ask him questions. Now, the questions that you ask are going to be different from the questions that I ask, but I'm probably interested in your questions and you're probably interested in my questions. So there's this common, there are these common questions that people want answered, but then everybody has their own idiosyncratic questions that they want potential dates filtered on. Moreover, people have different weightings of what questions are important. You might think at first glance religion is mandatory. It's a very important thing that you're in religion. And there might be other dating sites out there. There are other sites out there where their matching algorithm says, okay, religion is important, and we are making that subjective claim, and we're putting that into the matching algorithm. We allow each person to weight each question on a scale of 1 to 5, from irrelevant to mandatory. So you can say, you know what, for me, I'm allergic to cats. So if you have a cat, that's a deal breaker. But I'm very open about religion. I don't really care. Whatever religion you want to be is fine with me, and I actually mark that as only a little bit important. So both in that we let people upload their own questions, we let people decide whether they want someone similar to them or different from them on every question, and we let people rank the questions, rate the questions differently. We basically have provided you the tool to have that conversation with your friend who's going to set you up on a date on OKCupid, with OKCupid. And we take those questions, we put them in, we apply some of our mathematical training to confidence adjust, to do the analysis, and then ultimately to show you in rank order the people we think you're most compatible with on OKCupid.
Huh. That's interesting. So are you able to then categorize people based on these algorithms?
Yes, we have a number of axes along which we categorize people. So each question that gets uploaded gets tagged to one of a number of categories. So if the question is about relationships, the question might be about hobbies, the question might be about intelligence, the question might be about lifestyle, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, each question gets categorized, and then we can do matching. We don't do a lot of this right now, although we have some products coming out that are going to leverage this more down the road. Actually, we just launched one called The Two of Us that does have that component of sub-matching along different categories. But yeah, we can do that, and that's just one of the elements of what we can do.
I guess from a security standpoint, like when I was talking to you about what we do and why this interested us, why your site and especially your blog site really interested us, is we are along the lines of promoting for people how to secure themselves, to protect against identity theft or fraud or things that might harm people from a security measure. And when we find someone using information like this, like your information is very interesting. So in our business, we call that framing. It's like where we have information, but we I don't want to call it lying because that's like a very that's what Maddie calls it.
It's not lying. It's placing your cards correctly on the table in order to entice the other person to react to a specific way that you want them to.
Sure.
So, and we saw one blog post that you had that talked about words to use or not to use in an email or your first written message back and forth that would elicit a response, or the worst words to use that would definitely turn off and not elicit a response.
That's right.
How do you come up with that? Like, how do you know what words, like telling a girl, I read this one, telling a girl that she's really hot the first time you talk, that's a massive turnoff. But most guys would probably say, well, that's the best way to win the girl over. So how do you come up with that information that that's actually a bad thing to do?
So it all started, the entire premise of the blog started from the fact that we see all these relationship experts, so-called relationship experts, whether it's in magazines or on the radio or on TV, telling people how to date, how to manage their relationships. And some of them may have good advice. We don't disparage all of them, but what we realize is these people are, at most, have a few hundred or a few thousand data points from their practice of psychology or therapy to draw on, and of course some academic training. But what we have is the interaction of millions of people in relationship context, in dating contexts. And there are so essentially we're running millions of experiments. We have millions of data points on these interpersonal interactions. These are real life, they're not test subjects, they're not being paid, they're not in any kind of an experiment. They're actually out there trying to do the best they can, presumably, to get that girl to reply or to pursue a relationship. So we said, why don't we essentially hold a mirror up to society and basically say, you guys want to know, what works in the various forms of dating? Well, we're going to do the analysis, again, dispassionately, and we're just going to come in and say, here's what the numbers show. So to your specific point, what we did is we looked at all of what we call first communications, so the first message between any two people that gets sent, which is a very obviously important message because it opens up the relationship, and obviously if it fails to elicit a response, that relationship is essentially over before it even begins. And of course, if it warrants a response, then only from there can the relationship take off. So we asked ourselves, hey, let's look at all of the millions of first. We only looked at a subset of them, but let's look at hundreds of thousands of these first communications that happen between any pair of people, and let's just run an analysis on a distribution of words that appear in those messages and the response rate, because presumably the goal of that first message is to get a response rate. So which messages that were successful, what words were present in the successful messages disproportionately to those messages that were present in the unsuccessful messages and vice versa?
So basically, it's the answers have come up from the community itself, from the community that's currently enrolled.
That's right. We pulled 1 million, I believe just over 1 million first communications, and we said which ones earned a reply. We put those in the success pile. We said which ones failed to elicit a reply. We put those in the fail column. We looked at the distribution of words in the success pool. We looked at the distribution of words in the fail pool, and from there we were able to say that certain words were more successful at eliciting that response.
Now, if you don't, I'm putting you on the spot here, so if you don't know this on top of your head, but what was like the most successful word in an email to elicit a response?
So we've got a bunch of this up on the blog, and of course we had to do some adjustment for sample size issues. We had to look at obviously all the articles and stuff like that had to be taken out and removed. But basically, if you kind of look, what people are looking for to make really successful first responses are essentially you need to have some depth to your emails. You need to have something either unique, something interesting, something that goes that makes your email stand out, that makes your email special. So you just asked a second ago about this issue of people saying you're hot in a message. Well, it turns out that is one of the easiest comments to make about someone. It doesn't require you to actually have read their profile. It doesn't require you to have actually thought about how your two profiles interact, what do you have in common, what do you have not in common. It requires you simply to have looked at their picture, or even not, and just say you're hot. So again, the kinds of things that were successful, and in fact in our blog we put that the word zombie was very likely to get a response. Not because zombies are the most important thing in the world, but imagine an email that ended up having the word zombie in it, right? It probably has some humor. It probably was, probably went into some detail about something in their profile. There was probably some reason, some contextual reason that zombie actually earned a place in that email. So again, it's all about to think about it sort of a form letter. Anything that would go in a form letter turns out to be bad. So if you just use generic salutations like hi, that's not as good as saying howdy. Again, imagine an email that starts out howdy. Just off the bat, that email is likely to have a little bit more of a personality to it. It's likely to have maybe a little bit more humor to it. You probably have a reason to think that howdy is an appropriate way to start a message to this person.
Or saying hola. I saw that one on there. Saying hola was actually a positive.
That's right. And so, again, maybe that's because you recognize that, they speak Spanish. Maybe that's because you're just being, again, witty or clever or trying to start out kind of lighthearted. So, again, it's hard for us necessarily to say why these things were successful, but when you kind of look at the slate of data, you can start to piece together some stories that make a lot of sense. The more customized, the more your personality gets revealed. And in fact, all of the sort of key interest groups. So if photography gets mentioned, that's really, that's going to be high. If, anything that are going to be hobbies or music groups, those are all things that are likely to get responses because you've actually gone and pinpointed something they're interested in. You've probably said, hey, I like photography too. What kind of camera do you have? Right? That's going to start that conversation rather than you're hot.
Right. You said in your previous comment that, and I thought this was interesting, a nice analogy that you and your partners thought, let's hold a mirror up to society and see what we get back.
Right.
When you held that mirror up, was there any part of human behavior that really just surprised you or shocked you? Like when you said, holy mackerel, I can't believe 50% of the people or whatever. Was there anything there that just really shocked you about human behavior in general?
Right. We are. It's funny. Not necessarily surprise. I think in general, we don't come at this really necessarily expecting any particular outcome. But one of our posts that we recently put up was on race, and I think there's a lot of at least people in our country, I think, want to believe that we're getting less racist over time. And actually, let me take off the over time thing because we don't have longitudinal data. But I think people want to believe that we're in a post-racial society. The election of Obama has had this radical effect. And one of the things we looked at was does your race matter? Does holding attractiveness constant and holding your compatibility constant, does the race of the sender impact whether or not somebody replies? And it turns out to have a huge effect. And we have a matrix for each sort of gender racial pair and gender racial recipients. We show that for example, African American women do not get responses to their messages. And then even within certain subgroups, like Indian women don't send messages to Indian men. They don't reply to messages from Indian men. So we, is any of this shocking? Probably not. But again, just in terms of holding that mirror up, there are lots of things that maybe people hadn't thought about in terms of sort of which races and which race gender combos were kind of most in demand and least in demand.
Yeah, that's interesting.
After seeing all of these personalities, can you categorize them? Are you able to categorize them into like larger subfamilies where you can determine the personality of a specific person by his preferences? The reason I'm asking this is that this would be specifically interesting to us as people who go, for example, on a social engineering gig and have to spot someone and try to size him up and try to think of the best path to elicit the right behavior from him.
Sure. What we do a lot of is we do a lot of comparing our users to other users. So relatively, yes, we can say that among OKCupid users, you are more aggressive, you are less liberal, you are more loving, you are more arrogant, that kind of thing, based on the data we collect on you. We have a hard time we have a harder time taking a user's set of responses and without normalizing data, just making an assessment that says, hey, we draw these conclusions about you. And I think one of the reasons we have that is because we really go out of our way not to be wrong. We would rather make a weaker statement that we have more confidence in than a stronger statement that we have less confidence in. So when we say to you that you are more religious than most, now you may see that on your profile. You may say, well, wait a minute, I'm not that religious. But it turns out that we can very confidently say that in the pool of people that is OKCupid users of your age and gender, you indeed are more religious. You answer questions in a way that indicates you're more religious than the average OKCupid user. Yeah. Or when we publish a match percentage on the site, you're an 82% match. We've taken the low end of our confidence interval. We've said, we'd rather slightly underestimate your compatibility than overestimate your compatibility. So if you just gave me a set of data, a set of answers, and said, draw conclusions about this person, I'd be pretty hard-pressed. But if you said, hey, take this user's data, cast them against the OKCupid mirror, if you will, then it'll be very easy for us to say, well, along these various axes, here's where these people rank.
But in that data set, you said you had maybe hundreds of thousands or even millions of people to compare that to?
That's right.
Yeah. So,
and in terms of sub-personalities, I mean, certainly, especially as we sort of talk to our advertisers, we do have sort of, cohorts. Like, we can determine if you're someone, if you've answered questions that you like clothes and you like to go shopping and you own more than 20 pairs of shoes or something like that, we can start to piece together that you might be, someone who likes to shop. And so we might be disproportionately likely to target an ad for an apparel company, but personality is so much deeper than that. So I think we can sort of bundle people into people of like categories, people of like interests, people of like consumption habits, people of like lifestyles. But a personality is just sort of encompasses all of those silos, and so I think that's a little bit harder for us.
So along those lines, you talk about personality. On one of the recent blog posts you had on there, had to do with the attractiveness and pictures, and it stated that no matter how much time you spend polishing the profile and message introductions and so on, it's the picture that matters the most. Have you seen any indication that a poor picture or poor level of attractiveness can be compensated through other methods?
Sure, and again, I think in the photo, it's not just how attractive the photo is, but also sort of your choice of photos that's important. People who have a varied photos, people who have photos of them doing interesting things, people who have photos of them sort of in their hobbies or whatever the case may be, tend to sort of. That's certainly one way, just in the photo itself, to offset pure attractiveness, is make sure you're putting your best foot forward. It's just like when you go to a bar, you might put on deodorant and you might, comb your hair. It's not so much that you're radically changing your inherent attractiveness, but you're certainly saying, I'm at least going to, not smell and have clothes that, aren't, all crumpled up. So in that same way, the analogy just in pictures is, pick pictures that actually are putting your best foot forward, and not just the one you grabbed off your phone, that's not that clear and is, not at a great angle. Beyond that, absolutely. And I think what you see is, in some cases, the more attractive the photo, I think in some cases you just see a balance of effort. People who know they're very hot and know that they're going to get a lot of demand maybe put less time into the actual writing of their profile, and then vice versa. I think people who know that their comparative advantage is going to be, their wit, their life story, the fact that they have that they're really interesting, rather than their comparative advantage being their looks, you're going to see again a more fleshed out set of essays, and you're likely to see pictures that are sort of matched up with those essays. Hey, here's a picture of me doing something, traveling to this great place, or skiing down this mountain, or whatever, dancing if I'm a dancer, or whatever the case may be.
So do you actually find that to be the case, where the more attractive the person, the less time they put into information on themselves, whereas the less attractive person, the more their pictures are, the more information about their hobbies and things like that?
That's a hypothesis. That's certainly an area of. I don't think we haven't published any findings on that yet. That's certainly, as we sort of brainstorm different things to dig through the data and look for. That's something that we have on our list to explore. So you can stay tuned to the blog to find that. That is an area where I suspect that to be the case.
It makes sense. It would be interesting to definitely see that data set. There was a guy who published an article on framing, and he did a research on just marketing, advertising, and he said that in advertising, saying 75% lean was better than saying 25% fat.
Absolutely.
Right? So it was like how you present this information, and it means the same exact thing. When you're saying 75% lean, it means that 25% of what you're about to buy is fat.
That's
but if you say 25% fat, people avoid it like the plague.
Yeah, and then I think there's a lot of data in the sort of in loss aversion, that if you describe winning something or losing something, of the same proportion, people are much more likely to not want to lose that because they feel that's a bigger loss. So yeah, I think there's a lot of cases where framing is certainly relevant, and I think we see a lot of that on OKCupid as well.
What about deception or people coming on there and maybe not answering the questions really? Like we were talking about this before you logged on. We have some questions we saw on your blog about things like burning the flag, or do you think it's okay to burn your nation's flag?
Right.
Now maybe in my head I do think it, but I say to myself, boy, if I answer this and I'm American, and some people might want to nail me to the stake here. So
sure.
How, do you find that people generally are honest in these things, or what's the value of being dishonest or deceitful?
That's right. So it's very hard. It's very hard for us to answer that question about whether people are lying to us. That would require us to have some way to know what the truth was, and for us to have gone and collected that data. Here's what we can say. What we can say is there are a couple of reasons why people have the incentive to tell us the truth. Number one, if you don't tell us the truth, then you're going to be matched with people who you're ultimately incompatible with or less compatible with. What that means is that you're essentially wasting your time. because you're going to go out on these dates, and these people are going to expect you to have met certain requirements, to have certain beliefs, to have a certain philosophy, to have a certain lifestyle. And you're going to show up on that first date, and you're not going to be what the other person expects. Moreover, you're going to have a hard time knowing if they're actually what you expect. So that's a little bit of a challenge. If you're trying to game the system, you may end up with higher matches with people that, for whatever reason you think are higher quality, but ultimately you're going to have a much low conversion rate, if you will, on those dates, because ultimately you're going to be disappointing to the person you show up with. Now, the other issue is, what happens if people answer questions randomly, which is certainly, a question that we get sometimes. Is what if somebody just, wants to get a lot of questions answered, so the confidence interval goes down, confidence adjustment goes down so that people can just get higher match rates. The problem with that is, if you answer, there are a lot of correlated questions on the site. There might be 10 questions about religion. There might be 40 questions about politics, or whatever the case may be. If you answer those questions inconsistently, now you've managed to essentially make everyone on the site unhappy, right? In one of your answers, you've angered the people who are very progressive, and then you've answered another question, and you've angered the people who are very conservative, and on. And now all of a sudden you end up with no high match rates with anyone across the board. Ultimately, these two factors are why we allow people to skip questions. So if you think there's a question that you'd rather not answer, you can skip it. And so that gives people, again, who might be in your situation where, wow, I believe this, but I'm afraid of, what that might suggest about me, we make it very easy for them rather than try to game the system just to skip that question and go on to the next one.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. Let me ask you this question, because we were talking a lot about social networks too. You mentioned in the beginning of how you had this concept to create more of a social atmosphere than an average dating site. Like you said, like there's a bar scene where people can come and talk and chat and be friends and hang out. Now, from an online perspective, how do you protect against maybe some of the dangers that are inherent with social networks for people that come in and lurk, or don't have the right intentions?
Can you be a little bit more specific? I mean, in general, my response, again, and you'll see throughout this conversation, I tend to sort of make offline parallels as much as possible, because I think ultimately, the socialness of online, in many cases, at least, at first principles, I often look offline and say, well, what's the corresponding case here? Look, if you're a woman and some guy walks up to you at a bar, do you immediately believe everything that he says to you? Would you immediately, upon no further information, would you get into a car with him and go to his house? Probably not. So those same kinds of common, instead you rely on common sense. You get a feel for the guy. Maybe you, meet up in a public place again for a second date, and you have coffee, and then a third date, maybe you meet some of his friends, and on and on and on. In that, we kind of think online behavior works kind of the same way. If somebody comes up to you and says, I'm the president of the United States, maybe you don't believe that. Maybe you kind of ask some questions and you get an invitation to the White House, and then okay, well, fine, I believe you now because I have an invitation to the White House. So you wouldn't believe everything someone told you at a bar. You don't believe everything someone tells you online. Now, the things people deceive about might be different. At a bar, it's very hard to lie about your height and weight, right? I mean, you're there, and short of wearing really, really high heels that, someone doesn't notice, you're more or less what you are. Okay. So online, you can totally lie about your height. You can put up a picture that's a few years old. Maybe your hairline was a little bit better. So you might be able to lie about some of the physical things, and you might lie about that disproportionately on your online dating profile rather than offline. But, are there married people, on online dating sites? Sure. Are there married people at bars who, conveniently didn't wear their wedding ring? Absolutely.
Yeah, I get the point. That's good.
Just an interesting statistic. How do bald people fare in your statistics? Are they like?
That's a good question. I don't think we've done that analysis yet. But that.
Oh, Maddie.
For me, if you don't mind, just for some reason, I'd like to know.
Yeah, for some reason. Oh, Maddie, it's okay.
So with that comment made, though, what is the future of the site? What additional research are you planning on doing?
We started the blog probably about 2 months ago, really just wondering, A, are we going to be able to find interesting findings? Are we going to come up with interesting findings? And B, will anybody care? Those are the two unanswered questions that we had when we started the blog. So we started putting up some blog entries, and I would say that over the first couple months, maybe we have we try to do one post a week or so. We have about 8 posts. I would argue that we've written some pretty interesting things. We've come up with some pretty interesting findings. So on that answer, yes, I think our data set is one that can generate interesting stories, interesting findings about society. And 2, does anybody care? We've actually found that, yeah, people do care. We've gotten a bunch of press from varied interests. From we were on an NPR show that was all about race because they were interested in the race post. We've gotten a bunch of people that are just interested in sort of the social angle that you guys are attracted to. We have people who are interested in the in the dating angle, just purely relationship stuff that people are writing about. It's a news story for some people when it's relevant to their niche or their geography or whatever the case may be. So we have a media outlet in Canada that says, look, as soon as you write something about Canada, let us know. We'd love to know how Canadians and Americans are different when it comes to dating. So it turns out people care about it, and I think our data set is interesting. So we plan to continue pursuing interesting angles. We haven't really dealt much with geography. I think there's still a lot to be done about pictures and photos. I think there's a lot to be done even beyond just we have a lot to do, and I expect that we'll continue to publish our findings as we come up with them.
Yeah, slip something in there about bald guys, though, for Maddie.
I will. I'll see what I can do.
That's what kind of attracted us to even contacting you was your blog. Your blog was really, really interesting to us. I mean, the information that you released on there, we found very fascinating to just kind of see how people answer these questions, and then how you match data together, data that didn't seem to go, like people's preferences in dating to their hygiene. It was like kind of, wow, that's amazing to me that those two things could be correlated in this data set. But then after reading the blog post, wow, that made a lot of sense.
Yep.
It teaches you a lot about human behavior. Do you tend to look at people a little different now after having all this data in your head?
Again, I try to remember that the data we find is aggregated, and I try not to hold them against individuals. Although I guess if I were bald and I found out that women don't like bald people, I might kind of look at women differently and say, I know what you're really thinking. But
So you sure you wanted to do it, Maddie? You sure? No, it's like going to a first date and like first question. So how often do you bathe?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Now you can just go to OKCupid and get the information. So you don't have to ask them anymore. Excellent. Well, I really appreciate your time, Sam. It really was interesting to us.
I think we like what you guys are doing, and I think that we've got one of the most interesting data sets around, and definitely for all of your single listeners, I think OKCupid is definitely the best dating site that we can find. We come at it in a very analytical way, and we think that you're very likely to not only find someone that's interesting, but also have a good time doing it.
Yeah, we created an account on the system just to try it out, and it had a very unique and easy-to-use feel to it, so it's definitely a good site.
That's the goal.
Well, thank you for your time again today, and thanks for sharing this data with us, too, on the Internet. Really very interesting stuff. We're going to be linking to the blog site and checking it out often as you keep updating it with new data sets.
Perfect. That sounds great.
Thanks a lot, Sam.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, man, it was great having Sam on here. I thought really interesting data sets that they have on their blog post. Don't you guys think?
Yes, definitely.
Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
No, I was going to say the methodology that they utilize to build that data set, I think that's really solid. There's some real validation in where they're coming up with that data set to turn around and put more credibility behind the conclusions that they actually have on a blog post.
One thing we always do here is we try to correlate this to some form of SE, how we can use this for social engineering. And the one blog post that he referred to that I know you and I, Jim, have been reading a lot and talking about, and I'll link to it in the podcast notes, but it's the title of it is Online Dating Advice, Exactly What to Say in a First Message. Now, that's long, but we'll link to it. And there's some things in that data set that I thought really can be used from a social engineering aspect, especially because a lot of social engineering for security audits are going to be done either on the phone or in writing through an email, besides doing the in-person social engineering gigs. But a lot of our initial engagements are going to be either through writing or phone. So they had some great do's and don'ts, like when writing, and this should be a given, but this is, I think you and I, Jim, were talking about this once. NetSpeak. They said epic fail. Any kind of NetSpeak. You know, and I remember once, maybe it wasn't Jim, it was Maddie. We were talking about an email that came, and it was like one of those spam emails that they wanted you to think it was Bank of America. Click on here, but in the middle of the message, you know, and they say put your account, and then instead of spelling out your account, they put you are. It's like, you know, you can tell some a 15-year-old hacker or something was the one who wrote that email, and their data set indicates the same thing. You know, basically using NetSpeak lowers the user's thought process about you being intelligent or you being genuine. So I thought that was interesting.
I think the other aspect of this, too, is it's very common for when we're doing penetration tests, the company I work in, for us to include users and the social engineering and users in that aspect of it. And so whenever we're creating fake accounts, we want to create fake accounts that are going to come across as interesting and trustworthy to the targets. And there's a lot of information in that, how to create that first introductory message, and also even their newest blog post about the attractiveness of the photo and how much that can mean to the success or failure in gaining responses. And there's some real lessons that can be applied to improve that process as well.
Yeah, because I thought, you know, especially when you're dealing with strangers, which this is how it correlates a lot to the dating site, but for us as security enthusiasts, like that first impression, they said even the way you start your message, using words like hi, hey, hello, terrible. They said generally you had, like the worst one was just hi, a negative 20, over 25% negative response rate from using hi as the first word in your response. Whereas using things like what's up or howdy or hola, those things elicited more of a response in people. Now, I'm not sure if we would do that in a social engineering gig, you know, start howdy. Please click on this link. But, you know, we might, it's good information to think about how we start our messages, how we start our information that we want people, what kind of response we want to elicit from them. Starting it with something that simplistic might turn them off right away.
Yeah, and then his mentions about specific items needing to be mentioned. Based on their data set, if you mention that you're in a vegetarian zombie heavy metal band, then you have a very high chance of getting a response back. So
yeah, you know, all this data set, kind of what it taught me, like especially the ending of that where it said you mentioned or noticed that or your name is. What I'm really learning about that is we go back to kind of one of our original discussions on our first podcast about information gathering. If you listen to what people are saying, you do enough information gathering. When your email or your phone call, whatever it is that you're going to use to social engineer that, to do that audit, it needs to contain valuable information that has real data behind it, as opposed to just some generic, bland. Like, I guess there is no script you can write for social engineering. Like, if you say this sentence, every time it's a magic word and you're in the door. There is no abracadabra.
Yep.
Like, you have to have real information, real data, and when you correlate all that with the company that you're trying to social engineer, then the information that you're going to portray has to have that feel to it, that you know who they are, you know who you are, you know the part you're playing, and then that gets right back into framing. You know, the perception of the data you're going to give to the person on the other end of the phone or the other end of that letter or email. It has to be that you are this person that you're saying you are, and you deserve this information that you're asking for.
I'm looking forward to what else they publish in the future. You know, because there seems to be a whole wealth of information in there. Just getting it farmed out and published is a great thing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Perhaps there's no real way to really, I don't know if this is the case, but maybe from what we understand here is that there is no real categorization, and at the end every person will have their own odd preferences, and maybe you can categorize people at large, as he said, to more aggressive, more loving, less caring, whatever.
What it points to is that the only way they were able to even categorize people is matched against a set of data of these million or so people they have in their database already.
Yeah.
So it's not against every human. It's not to say, like, if you answer these questions this way, you're more loving than every human. You're more loving than the 1,000 people before you that answered that question this way.
Yeah, but I think it's almost safe to say that is a semi-representative layer, at least of young people. I think I would say that this is like people up to 30, yeah?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I can agree with that statement.
So I would say that it's a general representative of the population, especially when you have so much. Maybe not exactly, because then you already state that the population is, connected to computers, which automatically excludes people who don't use computers. But generally, you could say that it does represent the general population of people within the same sort of society that we have, if you like.
Right. Yeah, because I saw some of their data sets went even all the way over to Europe, too. So I think that when you do look at that categorization, that maybe it's like you said, it's an age set. So the groups, I think he said, range from like 20-something up to 30-something. So in this data set, these people can be categorized. So we'll do a whole write-up on this podcast on the podcast page, a link to the blogs that we've been talking about during the session here. And I think we'll probably be linking to that often. If we'll talk to Sam about maybe doing getting some data sets from them and linking to them right in our blog, because I think that's where the information really is going to be useful for us. A lot of that blog post that they have and some of the data sets that they're going to be doing in the future, I think will be very interesting from a social engineering angle on how we can use that information in our practices for security. So I guess that concludes it for this month. Continue to check out the site, social-engineer.org.
And can we officially say that we've done the part about how to get free chicks?
I think we can. But now we have to come up with a new catch line, especially since OKCupid.com is free.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
How to catch free guys.
We have to come. Yeah, no, we're definitely not doing a podcast about that. Check us out on IRC, freenode.net, at the channel social-engineer. You can also follow us on Twitter at humanhacker. Feel free to check us out on the site. Send us keep sending the emails in to contribute at socialengineer.org. We love hearing what you guys think about the podcast and the newsletter, so we look forward to hearing about it this month. And just as a note on the outro, I'm going to mention it again. The music is Michael Anthony. You can find him on ccmixer.org and check out some of the other music that he has if you like what you hear there. Okay, so I guess this is it till next month, guys. We'll talk to you later.
See you then.
Stay on track. Watch your back. Walk on. Looking around you and thinking it's okay. Forgetting about the things that you did yesterday. So many problems you face. Oh, walk that away. Stay on track. Walk on. Watch your back. Walk on. Stay on track. Walk on. Watch your back. Oh, walk on. Walk on. Walk on. Walk on. When I'm thinking about the times you say, talking about every single day. 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Walk on. Trying to remain on track. Yeah. watch your back. Stay on track. Watch your back. Stay on track. Watch your back. Stay on track. Watch your back. Walk on. Walk on. Walk on. Walk on. You walk up to the line. Time after time. Thinking things will stay the same. Now the game isn't played that way. You've got to stay on track. Walk on, watch your back. Walk on, stay on track. Walk on, watch your back. Walk on, looking around you and thinking it's okay. Forgetting about the things that you did yesterday. But if you only knew that the game isn't played that way. Stay on track, walk on, watch your back, walk on, stay on track, walk on, watch your back, walk on, stay on track, walk on, watch your back, walk on, stay on track, walk on. Watch your back, walk on, stay on track, walk on. Watch your back, walk on, stay on track, walk on. Watch your back, walk on, stay on track, walk on. Watch your back, walk on, stay on track, walk on. Watch your back, walk on.